Hi everyone, welcome. This is Nicholas from KORUA Shapes talking about turning today. I think there's many different ways to do turns and many different styles. Today I just want to talk about what helped me in the past or what I look out for when I'm turning and snowboarding. I was thinking we could start with the basics and then kind of go into more specific sort of things. For me, I started in flatter terrain that was well prepared, not very crowded. I do mount steeper binding angles so I don't touch the snow. I also check the line that I did to see if if it's a wider track, usually it's my boot dragging somewhere, so I try to get rid of that. What you want to look out for is like a super nice and thin, clear line. Of course, I make sure my edges are sharp before I go out, especially if the conditions are pretty hard. Doesn't matter so much in soft snow, but if it's hard, you want to have a good grip. I also check my high backs so they have enough forward lean and I can feel them immediately if I turn into a heel side turn. So basically how carving works is that the more you tip up your board, the tighter turn you will pull. So we want to tip our board up as much as possible to do a nice tight and low turn. I recommend to start off slow, like don't go super fast. If you're new to it, just go in slow, like a speed that you're still comfortable to crash if that happens. What helped me a lot in the past was being able to see myself ride on video or pictures, because you get a better idea what you're actually doing, because sometimes your feelings that you have riding are not matching whatever you're actually doing. So if you have friends who can film you or you can film each other with your phones, that for sure helps. So what a lot of people are interested in is getting low on their board, like doing deep and low carves. The first thing I concentrate on is to really bend my knees in the turn while keeping my torso upright. This allows me to keep my center of gravity close to the edge of the board. What I see often is that people, if they want to carve, they kind of bend down and try to touch the snow. But this makes your hips move away from the center of gravity or further away from the edge of the board, and you're more likely to kind of wash out on a turn. So focus on bending the knees. That brings us to your hips, which I think is the most central part of carving. That's the thing I concentrate on most when I'm riding. I want to bring my hips into turn, like what we talked about before with bending your knees and keeping the torso upright. If you want to manage to do that, you will have to bend your hips and lay the hips into the turn. That serves the same reason, to keep your center of gravity close to that edge that is your grip, essentially. Once you've managed to do that hip bend, I start to focus on the shoulders. While I'm turning, I notice that if I keep the shoulders more frontal, so facing the nose of my board, it really helps me get an even deeper bend into the turn, and that gives me more grip again. And by tucking your knee towards the front of the board as well, it works even better. This essentially makes your hip face more forward and anatomically easier to lay into the turn. If I focus on those three things, like the shoulder torso facing forward, the knee facing forward, I can get even lower in my knees, which results in a lower turn and more stability in the turn. On toe edge turns, I try and lift my back shoulder up and away from the snow to get that hip bend going again. And on the heel side turn, I do the same with the front shoulder. I lift it up and away from the snow, and that's for the same reason. I like to use my arms for momentum and creating speed and style, but I tend to overdo it sometimes, which throws me off balance, and I would recommend to kind of tune it down for the beginning and just focus on all the other things, and then start feeling it once you feel comfortable with everything else. So the next thing we want to talk about is choosing your line. If I get the chance to, and that's often, I kind of stop and scope the line I want to ride beforehand. So I choose the spots that look nice to turn. Often that's a bank or a bump or something. Actually, I really like banks because it really helps you lay into the turn deep. It gives you something to push against when you're coming out of the turn. So if you imagine rolling a big ball down the slope in front of you, it will be guided by the terrain features in the slope. And those are usually the features that you would want to choose because they'll often do the most of the work for you. So once I've dropped in, it really helps me to remind myself to look ahead early on to the next feature where I want to place my turn. That really makes it a lot easier to hit that actual spot and not kind of get off of your line. So if I want to get low on steeper slopes, they're more difficult. I use more of the slope, so I go from one side to the other side, and in between turns I go sideways or even uphill to kind of manage my speed and not get too fast. That helps a lot if you really want to get low on a steep slope. Of course, you can also go a fall line on a steep slope, but it's going to be hard to kind of get really low on those turns, and you won't get to ride them out totally. But it's still super fun. You can do shorter turns as well, but it's kind of harder to carve them. You can also drift them in shorter slopes, like start drifting into the turn and hit the edge kind of towards the end. That's also a way of riding steeper slopes. One of the funnest things to work on for me in the last years was maintaining speed. So making sure I take speed out of the first turn into the second one and into the third one, and not losing that speed, because that's what makes for a good turn, for me personally anyways. And there's a few ways you can do that. If I manage to stay low in my turn, I can kind of use that being low and push myself out of the turn, and that kind of generates speed by stretching my legs towards the end of the turn. That's a really good one. And another thing I do is I call it pressure shifting. It's kind of a delicate thing to do, so start off really easy. But what I do is on the beginning of the turn, I have more pressure on the front end of the board, like more in the nose area, kind of leaning a bit forward. And then I bring the weight back, shift it back into the middle center of the board at the mid center of the turn, and then shift it all the way back towards the end of the turn. That'll also kind of give you a momentum to generate speed, or at least keep it up. I also use my arms to support that motion with kind of a really slight swing, I would say. On my heel side turns, I'm exaggerating now, but it kind of looks like this. And then I'm set up for my toe side turn where I swing back again, and I'm kind of set up for my heel side turn. And that way you can also generate kind of speed and generate motion. So with this, it's not only the arms that are doing the motion, but also the shoulders go along. So on my heel side turn, I kind of pull back my front shoulder, and on the toe side turn, I do the opposite. I hope that was helpful for you guys. Thanks for watching, and have fun working on your turns.